gills do not attach directly to the stem. You have this ring. That's actually the leftover covering that protected the gills while it was growing, and they have these weird, these are these scales that grow on top. You can see as it gets bigger, they kind of grow like that. But the main thing that separates them from other mushrooms is that they have a spore print that is green. So if you were to put this on a white piece of paper and then put something on that, it'll look like this weird moldy barf green color. They also usually don't smell too good, probably because of all the treatments that people put in their lungs. I've never enjoyed the smell, but as long as you don't eat these, this is important. Mushrooms are only toxic if you ingest them. So if you leave these mushrooms alone in your yard, they actually are really good for it because they break down nutrients and put it back in the soil. So that's why fairy rings are usually darker, is because that grass is healthier. So leaving it in your lawn is actually the best course of action. And then this is the last mushroom I'm going to go over. This is the Flymania, the toadstool, or all of these other, this is the quintessential mushroom that everybody thinks about when they think mushroom. So these are actually a symbiote with pine trees, and is actually, the inspiration for Alice in Wonderland, Mario, all this stuff. There's two types. We have the red-capped ones, and we have the yellow-capped ones. These ones are the more common ones. I think these are the ones that are actually native to our area, whereas these ones, I think they came over with non-native pines. They are poisonous. Some people eat them to get high. I don't recommend it. It causes loss of muscle coordination and all kinds of nasty stuff. But you can see here they have this pimply, weird, warts on them, and with this white stem and these free gills with a sac about the base and a ring. This is quintessential Amanita. So they will. Sometimes the ring and stuff falls off, but usually what this is actually when the mushroom grows, it spreads out and it breaks that egg that it grows out of apart. And so it leaves these things on the stem. So if you ever go out and you see this bright red toadstool and stuff, that's what this is. It's called the fly amanita, or it's toadstool. So these are the two guides I use. I use the National Audubon Society Field Guide to Mushrooms and 100 Edible Mushrooms by Michael Kuo. I also recommend his website, mushroomexpert.com, and then Mushroom Observer if you can't find it. So I'll leave this on screen for people to write it down. This is also a good guide that goes more in depth on how to identify mushrooms. It's on urbanmushrooms.com. These two subreddits here, if you take pictures of mushrooms and want them ID'd, if you post a picture along with your location and some general info, people will help you identify them. And then if you have any questions, I'll leave a link over on the thing over here. You can email me, and I can either send you this PowerPoint, or I can identify photos of mushrooms if you send them to me. I'm more than happy to do it. I love mushrooms, and I love identifying them. So, are we good?
When you go out and pick your mushrooms, do you try and spread the spores around so more will grow?
Actually, that's a good point. I'm also going to leave this on screen. This is just a final thought. That actually doesn't really do much, especially if you use the bag. There is a thing you can do with old mushrooms, is you can chop them up and then soak them in water, and that creates what's called a slurry. And then you could dump that in the relative area where you want it to grow, and then usually 4 or 5 years later you might start seeing mushrooms. It takes them a long time to grow, because you got to remember they grow from a single cell, one cell. So they have to find a plant that they're symbiotic with, or habitat that they're used to, and then they spread out, and that's when you usually see fairy rings or stuff. But if it works, you will eventually start getting them. It apparently works with morels too. So with the final thoughts, always remember the rule: when in doubt, throw it out. If it doesn't look like something that you're familiar with, or if you're just not sure, always take a rod of caution, because there are old mushroom hunters and there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old and bold mushroom hunters. They say everything is edible at least once. Always exercise caution, and remember that allergies exist. And I forgot to mention this, but poisons that people herbicides, pesticides, heavy metals, all that stuff will get absorbed into a mushroom. So don't pick on like roadsides or in areas where people treat their lawns. Even if it's a morel, it's going to be poisonous in that case because they're actually thinking about using morel or mushrooms to clean up heavy metal because they absorb it so readily. So, and then again, the more you re-identify something, the more automatic the process becomes. Like, if you saw an orange in the woods, you're gonna know it's an orange. And the same thing applies with mushrooms. The more you do it, the more expertise you get. And there's always more to learn. Don't feel bad if you're like, oh, I don't know what this is. Nobody's gonna, if they try to gatekeep you, they're a jerk. Mushrooms are a huge, huge kingdom. Nobody knows everything. We're always learning, and it's always good to ask questions. So never feel bad if you don't know what something is or if you can't figure it out. I still don't know what these mushrooms here are. I've been trying to figure it out for 5 years. Still haven't found an ID. So yeah, I'll take questions now.
You didn't have shaggy names on there, did you?
I had to cut it down to 10 mushrooms.
Okay.
Shaggy manes actually, they're a inky cat. So they
Yeah,
are
I
super
know
soft.
those. Yep.
And if you keep them anywhere other than, dehydrating it right away, they will dissolve themselves. But they have that bell-shaped cap, and then they turn black on the edges, and then they slowly melt up. And they also have a hollow stem, and they grow in lawns and stuff.
Can you bring up a picture of one,
Oh, yeah.
so that other people can, that's what I was gonna ask about.
Okay.
Because in the state of Michigan, the shaggy manes are considered the number 2.
Wow, I didn't know that. You can see them melting here.
And they're all over the place.
Yeah, they don't last too long.
Oh no, it's about 24 hours. So they have to grow up. These ones are, this one will probably start melting that afternoon. So these are the buttons, and then this is the mature mushroom.
You get the button or the one that's in the middle that's the
Yeah,
second
you want
line.
these ones.
The second to that one like that.
I wanted to include it, but I didn't know if I had enough time, so, but yeah, shaggy manes definitely are a good one. They actually prefer lawn. So if you find an area that, I've seen them over by Petoskey schools, there used to be a whole bunch of them that grew in those lawns. Over by the ice rink, I've seen them grow in that lawn. Over by the river, I've seen them grow there.
Go into Mill Creek, where, the sawmill is,
Yeah,
and you'll find them all over the place.
yeah. Yes, in fact.
Just a question about cooking. Is there any other methods you use to cook besides sauteing them in butter?
I mean, some of them can be baked, some of them can be, air fried, but you do have to cook them because because of that chitin, our stomachs can't process it. So if you eat it raw, it'll actually give you the runs because your body doesn't know what to do with it. It'd be like eating lobster. It'd be like eating the whole lobster, not just the meat. It's kind of.
I just wondered if there was any other method.
The shaggy mane, if you cook it in butter,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and then right after you're done, freeze it,
Yeah, that's
and
important.
it'll last
Yeah.
for as long as it's frozen, and then put it in scrambled eggs.
Yes, it's so good. I have tried at least 40 or 50 different species of mushrooms so far. So a lot of them, some of them taste like portobello, some of them taste like, just regular stuff. But some of them, like chanterelles, they have that fruity flavor, so they're really good in like cream sauces and pastas. They're a very good Italian mushroom. Some of them, there's actually 2 mushrooms that I use for baking. It's called the matsutake, which is also called the pine mushroom. It grows on the west coast and it smells like cinnamon. I use that for like cookies and stuff, and along with the candy cap. It smells and tastes exactly like maple syrup. You gotta remember, this is not just a family like birds. Birds are a class in the kingdom Animalia. These are an entire kingdom. There's so much variety, and a lot of them you can't even see. And I think that's why people, like, the number one question is always, can I eat this? And it's like, well, why don't you ask that with, like, birds or plants and stuff? It's like, well, it's not like you can plant them or keep them in a flower pot or, you can't attract them to your bird feeder. So it does make sense because they're usually only up for, like, a couple of weeks and then they're gone.
Can you bring up a picture of it, well, I'll ask first, an Indian pipe,
Yes, that's actually a plant.
and it's not a mushroom,
Mm-hmm.
but, I worked over at Mill Creek, And I had a guy come up to me with one in his hands, right, like, yeah, that's like that.
Yeah.
He came in, yeah, and he says, look what I found. And, he showed me that, and I had never seen one before. And he said he'd been looking for years.
Last year, I've never seen so many in 1 year.
I went home that day, and I said, I showed her a picture of it.
Mhm.
And she says, oh, we got some of them right out there by the waterfront.
They're actually, they use mushrooms to parasitize other plants, so they use that mycelial network underground because they don't have chlorophyll, so that's the only way they can get food. So they're basically a plant that was looking at mushrooms and they're like, I kinda like what you got going on, I'm gonna try that, and the mushroom's like, that's not what we're doing. It's like, no, I'm doing it, guys, I'm doing it.
So can you eat those?
I think they're medicinal.
Yeah, you can eat it.
Okay,
I
yeah.
can grow up behind the house.
I don't, they're wildflower, I prefer to leave them alone,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
How about, I mentioned before, coral.
coral mushroom, yeah.
Well, I was told, the reason why I bring it up is, I was told that you can get them in different colors.
Oh, yeah.
The gold ones, I was told you don't wanna eat them.
These
The
are
white
crown
ones,
tip coral.
You do, like the one in the middle and the second line, those are edible, but the gold ones are not edible.
Yeah, those are the ones, they're called ramarias, they grow directly on the ground. These are all crown tip corals, they grow on rotting wood, but they grow up instead of down, like teeth mushrooms. So these ones are good to stir fry and stuff, but you can see too, close up of the tip of it looks like they got a little crown on the tip, whereas ramarias have forking tips. So coral mushrooms are a huge, huge family. Most of them aren't good.
First time I ever saw one, I looked at it and said, well, that looks like coral. And it turned out that's what the native was.
Yeah, because
It's
common names are
that
super original.
easily identifiable.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Awi?
I gave my closing thoughts.
Okay, I'm gonna
So
stop the
just
video.
remember when